Red Bull leaves Monaco with a 4th position for Verstappen and a disastrous race for Tsunoda. It was expected. Monte Carlo has never been favorable ground for the RB21. Too tortuous, too slow, no area where the Red Bull chassis and efficiency could really shine. The real Achilles heel of the car is clear, slow curves, and Max also said it. No grip in the second sector. And the difficulties remained there all weekend. If you like the videos, hit like to support me. And now let's get started right away. The heaviest fact is this. Verstappen, the reigning champion, is now 25 less than Piastri and 22 less than
Norris, exactly.
the threshold that Red Bull had set to limit the damage before Barcelona. Translated, the minimum goal has been saved, but the margin for errors from here on out no longer exists. Now come the new technical directives, and consequently the mandatory updates for the front wing. Mercedes has moved ahead by mounting the new spoiler at Imola. Red Bull and Ferrari will make more changes.
Mild. Why?
Because they are the teams that least exploit extreme aeroelasticity. The real suspects from the new directive are McLaren and Mercedes. And this could change everything if McLaren loses even a little bit of load in the slow corners. Verstappen is back in the game, and they know it well at Red Bull. However, what is really making the difference in Red Bull's strategy is the obsessive focus on tire management. It's the weakest point of the RB21, and that's where they're playing for the World Championship. The updates brought between Jeddah, Miami, and Imola have worked, but they are not enough. The most important package will arrive by the end of June. And it's not just about classic aerodynamics. The work is focusing on corners, wheels, rear baskets, cooling, optimized airflows. That's where the real margin is, especially with a technical regulation now squeezed to the limit. There's also another fundamental point. In parallel to the 2025 updates, work is already underway on the 2026 in Milton Keynes. And this means that every hour in the wind tunnel counts double. Finding advantages on wheel corners allows for performance improvements without burning precious resources in computational fluid dynamics and general aerodynamics. Red Bull has peppered the FIA with requests for clarification. What can be done there? How far can it be pushed? Because if they can find an advantage in that area, they can put McLaren back in check even before the summer. But be careful, McLaren has a real package in the works, not yet shown. The Jeddah diffuser was a test. The rivals never really believed in the data collection. And if the Woking team brings everything to Austria, the direct comparison will be inevitable. A new round that could decide who sets the pace in the second half of the year. In all this, Ferrari observes, there's hope that the directive will weaken McLaren, but the SF25 isn't consistent enough to take advantage of it. Red Bull knows this, that's why they're not waiting. They're preparing the technical counterattack specifically for the Spanish Grand Prix. Barcelona is the real technical watershed of this season. The new Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile Technical Directive is not just a regulatory update, it's a direct hit to the foundations of the car's aerodynamic balance. We're talking about a tightening of flexibility tests on the front wings, with the minimum rigidity increased from 30 up to 66%. It's a change that goes well beyond speed. On the straight, it impacts the entire setup philosophy, the balance, the driving style required of the drivers. The stiffer wings generate more resistance in a straight line, but this is just the surface effect. So far, those who had flexible wings could run with heavier setups, gaining a lot in the curve without paying too much in terms of drag. McLaren has been a master in this, no doubt. The flexibility allowed it to take better care of the tires, maintain more load in progress, and manage the long runs better. But now everything changes. And no, it's not said that McLaren will be the most penalized, because even with the new directive, the wings can still flex. The point is to do it while staying within the limits imposed by the new tests. And here is where the technical ability of the teams comes into play, in designing components that deform on the track but not under the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile static tests. Who wins this challenge? We will find out as early as Friday. Balance is the most critical aspect. With ground effect Formula 1, keeping the car balanced from 300 to 31 miles per hour is a technical nightmare. The flexion served this purpose. Less load on the front in high speed to avoid losing the rear, more incidents in slow speed to combat understeer. Now all of this gets complicated. Whoever fails to manage the balance risks not only the lap time, but also stepping out of the ideal tire usage window. And in this Formula 1 so compressed in values, it's those 2-3 tenths that make you go from podium to out of Q3. The problem is not just the wing, but the entire chassis. Red Bull and Ferrari are the two cars most focused on the front. This means that with less help from the wings, the risk is having a car that's too nervous at the front and unstable at the back. McLaren and Mercedes, on the other hand, have a more stable base on the rear axle. McLaren has demonstrated this with textbook tire management. Mercedes has grown a lot since Imola, thanks to a rear suspension that works. And who is at greater risk? Who has overly rigid suspensions? Because if you don't have mechanical margin to adjust the ground heights, any aerodynamic change throws you off balance. And if you can't effectively intervene on springs and shock absorbers, you're screwed. You lose the balance and the bottom doesn't work as it should anymore. That's why the work on Friday will be crucial in Barcelona. Setup adaptation data collected. Ferrari has chosen not to bring any other updates besides the new wing. Vasseur wants to focus on pure setup. It's a precise move, fewer variables, more control. According to Maranello, this directive can really reshuffle the
Cards. And
Toto Wolff confirmed that Ferrari was one of the most conservative on flexible wings. Perhaps for this very reason, they could now be among the least affected teams. But be careful, because it's not just a technical issue. The driving style also matters. Drivers who love a pointed front and can manage oversteer in speed will be advantaged. Verstappen is the absolute reference in this, but Leclerc and Norris are also excellent interpreters. Those who need more confidence in the rear, like Hamilton, risk running into difficulties. And we saw in the first races, Lewis never got along well with the SF25 in speed. In summary, don't expect a total overturn in the standings already in Spain, but those who haven't done their homework will start to pay the consequences. And in a Formula 1 where 6 teams are within 5/10, it takes nothing to collapse or explode. Meanwhile, Pirelli changes gear after 2 GPs. With the softer compounds, the hardest of the 2025 C, 1C2 and C3 range return to Spain. It's a return to the classic. Here you need structure, because Montmeló is full of fast curves that massacre the front left, especially curve 3 and 9. And that's where the difference is made on the race pace. The new compounds, however, have been rebalanced. The C2 has changed closer to the others in terms of performance. So we expect a race focused on medium and
soft. The
hard could remain a solution for the final stint or for strategic emergency. And watch out, as always, Barcelona is also a testing ground for technical developments. Here we will see the new front wings imposed by the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile Directive, stiffer, less elastic, with effects still all to decipher. The Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile static tests are more severe, but the teams have still tried to save some of the actual dynamic flexion. Whoever has managed to do this better will have a significant advantage. And right here, Friday will be crucial. We will see a lot of flow viz and a lot of live telemetry. The teams need to understand on the fly if they need to recalibrate everything. Pirelli, then the development work will continue. 2026 with private tests on Tuesday and Wednesday after the Grand Prix. Mercedes will run both days. Racing Bulls on Tuesday, Red Bull on Wednesday. In Barcelona, despite no longer being the reference for seasonal testing, it remains the key track for developing tires and setups. On a technical level, the minimum pressures at the start will be 26 psi at the front, 22 at the rear, while the maximum camber is set at less than 300 degrees at the front and less than 175 degrees at the back. This confirms how lateral forces are still crucial here, especially when exiting fast corners. Looking at 2024, the double pit stop had been the rule. Most of the drivers had chosen the softs at the start. Verstappen had won on a double soft strategy.
and today,
with more spaced out compounds and an improved C2, the strategy could see a return to the combined use of medium and soft with more aggressive final stints. The track remains long 2,893 miles with 66 laps to complete and 14 total turns. The 2023 modifications with the removal of the final chicane have improved the flow of the last part, favoring a faster exit towards one of the longest straights of the championship. Turn 3 remains the key point for aerodynamic load, along with Turn 9. And then there's the asphalt, always monitored by Pirelli with three-dimensional surveys. The measurement of the micro and macro roughness of the road surface heavily influences the grip and degradation of the tires. A smoother or too rough surface can completely throw off the simulations, and Barcelona is known for having an intermediate macro roughness, but with a very marked evolution of the grip during the weekend. Those who have done well here in past years have built momentum. Verstappen, Norris and Hamilton were on the podium in 2024, all with perfect management of the compounds. Historically, this Grand Prix has given first times and decisive moments: the winning debut of Verstappen in 2016, the madness to Maldonado in 2012, the exploits of Lauda and Massa in the 70s. Statistically, Ferrari is the most successful team in Barcelona with 12 victories in the Spanish Grand Prix plus 2 in Valencia. Hamilton and Schumacher, on the other hand, lead among the drivers with 6 victories each, and it's Lewis who is the biggest unknown today. He has struggled on all the fast curves of the SF25 so far, and if the balance changes, as it seems with the Directive on the wings, he risks suffering even more. In a Formula 1 where a few hundredths separate glory from mediocrity, Barcelona 2025 is much more than another European Grand Prix. It's the first real snapshot post-Directive, the point where it's understood who has margin and who has only disguised the problems. When Leclerc talks about the future of Ferrari, he doesn't do it by chance. He speaks with one eye on the track and the other already on 2026. And the key today is to find a unique direction between two very strong drivers, but deeply different in the adaptation phase. Him and Lewis Hamilton. At the beginning of the season, it was said that Leclerc and Hamilton drive in a similar way. On paper, yes. Both are aggressive entering the curve. Both want a car that responds immediately, that points its nose in without hesitation. But then, race after race, the differences emerged. Charles' extreme setups, the ones that squeeze every 10th in qualifying, Lewis can't keep up with them. He clearly said he can't get the SF25 to work on those settings, and this in the Ferrari world matters. But Charles says it clearly, the fundamentals are common, the approach to the curve is similar, the aggressiveness is similar. And this is a good thing because it means that the chassis of the future can speak to both. That there's no need to make two different cars or resort to absurd compromises, it just needs to refine the base. And meanwhile, in these first months of cohabitation, Leclerc has already started. He has started to learn. Not only from Lewis's driving small things that he has already tried to use in the race, but also, and perhaps above all, from what Hamilton does outside the cockpit. The management of time of the team around pressures, Leclerc says it clear, Lewis is a master at managing this crazy life we lead. And this is an aspect that few see, but that inside the box counts a lot. Hamilton has a perfect organization, filters out everything that is not needed, focuses only on the work he has to do at the wheel. And this is where Charles is observing. Because if there's one thing Leclerc wants, it's to grow not only as a driver, but as an internal reference. And if he can take the method as well as the talent from someone like Hamilton, then the balance is all in his favor. The Ferrari of the future, Charles says, will be built for both, but today the one that takes the best advantage is still his. And the difference is not just in the foot, but in how the car talks to him. The real challenge is to make it speak the same language with Lewis as well. Flavio Briatore is back in Formula 1, but he's not the ambassador Briatore nor the behind-the-scenes advisor. He's the Briatore who makes decisions, who moves drivers, who treats seats like goods on the market. Today he is the interim team principal of Alpine, and under his management the seat of the A525 has literally become an auction. From the outside, the situation at Alpine is disastrous. 8 races, only 7 points. The F525 project was born badly, grew worse. Renault is pulling out of the power units for 2026, and inside the team there is total instability. The first to go was Jack Doohan, catapulted into Formula 1 too soon, destructive on the track and never really able to hold the level. But the truth is that his fate was sealed even before he hit the track. Then came Franco Colapinto, an Argentine rookie. He had plenty of grit but few results. 2 GPs without impressing, a crash at Imola, and the usual specter of the number 6 in the test hanging over his head. In fact, his contract is part-time, he's not a starter, he's just a name on the list like Doohan before him, like perhaps Mick Schumacher soon. Already Mick Briatore has him in his sights, not for nostalgia of the name Schumacher, but for what he brings with him. Sponsor many fresh money for a team that in doubt has decided that the goal is no longer performance but financial survival. The reality is this, the Alpine seat has become merchandise. Whoever pays more runs. Briatore makes no mystery of anything. The arrival of Colapinto was accompanied by a massive marketing campaign by Mercado Libre, an Argentine sponsor. Now they are talking about Schumacher with World Endurance Championship partners ready to support him. They call it selection, but it's a casting and the criterion is not the stopwatch, it's the bank account. And meanwhile, everything remains still on the track. The results are not coming, the young ones are getting burned one after the other, and the team is moving without vision. Doohan has never been put in a position to learn. Colapinto raced knowing that every mistake could be the last. Now Mick could only return for a handful of GPs before the roulette starts again. This is the new Alpine branded Briatore. A team that no longer seeks talent but the complete package driver plus sponsor better if ready immediately. No time to grow, no margin for error. Yet this team just 3 years ago was talking about top 4 podiums in the World Constructors' Championship. Today, however, it rents seats to finance the transition towards a 2026 full of question marks. Briatore has brought back a logic from the 2000s, but the context has changed. This is no longer the Formula One where a private team can afford to survive with the driver's money. If Alpine continues down this path, the risk is burning everything. Credibility, structure, and even those few young people who still believe in the project. The question is only one: are they looking for a future or are they just selling the present? Formula One could finally return to Africa after over 30 years since the last Grand Prix in Chalami in 1993. The continent could embrace the circus again, but not where everyone expected. Because if so far we only talked about South Africa or more recently Rwanda, today a new name comes into play, but with history and ambitions: Morocco. We're talking about a huge project worth $1.2 billion to build a real mini Abu Dhabi of our own. In Tangier, a Grade 1 circuit, therefore approved for Formula 1, VEC and MotoGP, but not only that. A theme park, hotel, marina, shopping center, all 12.4 miles from Tangier. And perfectly connected with Europe through the port of Algeciras and the international airport. Who is behind this? A name that we know well in Formula 1, Eric Boullier, former team principal of McLaren and Lotus, today promoter of the project after having already managed the French Grand Prix at Castellet. He was the one who led the feasibility study. According to his team, the chosen land already meets all the criteria required to host a race, but government approval is needed. And that's where the real game is played. Boullier, it's clear, is a tourist project first and foremost, but built to withstand the whole year. It doesn't want to be a Disneyland of motorsport that lights up for 3 days and then remains empty. We want to create a complete ecosystem. Alive, 12 months out of 12, and the Grand Prix would just be the tip of the iceberg. And mind you, Morocco wouldn't be an absolute novelty. Formula One has already raced here. It was 1958 in Casablanca, Sterling Moss won, but the race was marked by the tragedy of Stuart Lewis Evans, who died from burns after a
Crash.
historic and dramatic page that marked the end of Morocco in the calendar until today. Now, however, the context is completely different. The country wants to return, and it wants to do it in a big way. South Africa has stumbled between logistical difficulties and lack of political support. Rwanda made an attempt with the Fédération Internationale de l'Automobile Gala in Kigali, but so far it has not materialized anything. Meanwhile, Tangier is quietly advancing with a concrete, ambitious project that is already detailed. The political signature is needed. But if it were to arrive, Formula One would return to the African continent with a spectacular Grand Prix potentially as early as 2025. And Formula One, which always talks about inclusivity and globalization, can no longer ignore the only continent still excluded from the calendar. If you liked the video, hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss out upcoming ones. Let me know what you think in the comments and see you next time.